Thank you. So we'll spend the next 25 minutes or so focused on the Initiative for Responsible Mining Assurance, or IRMA. In the next slide, you'll see what we'll cover today. What is IRMA? We'll look at the IRMA standard for responsible mining. We'll look at IRMA assurance, our market coverage, and what we hear in the world makes IRMA different. So in the next slide, we'll begin talking about our origins at IRMA. IRMA started as a discussion in 2004 around campaigns focused on the jewelry sector, specifically the No Dirty Gold campaign that was calling on jewelers such as Tiffany and Company to responsibly source their materials. And one of the responses from Tiffany and Company and others is, okay, where should we source from? Where are the responsible mines? And the answer was, it's not clear. We can't find a clear answer to this question anywhere. A, what is responsible mining? And B, where are the responsible mines? And IRMA was developed to fill this gap. In the next slide, you'll see some of our approach to answering this question. It was really important to everyone, to NGOs, workers, purchasing companies, mining companies, investors, the NGOs involved, to everyone engaged in IRMA, that this was a co-created response to the question, what is responsible mining? And that if we develop this, which we did, into an institution, a standard, a system, that it would from the very beginning be neutral and equally owned. So this became the foundations of IRMA, which was formalized in 2007. And in the next slide, you'll see these 6 houses that equally govern IRMA: mining companies, purchasing companies, investors and finance, NGOs, organized labor, and affected communities. IRMA is the only mining standard that's equally governed by these 6 houses. And we find that shared governance builds shared confidence. So, when I, as our law and policy director, am looking at the standards landscape, I am looking at what's in a standard. I'm looking at how is it governed, how are audits undertaken, how are reports of these audits shared publicly. And underlying all of this, even if we get all of this right, the standard and system must be trusted by all of these houses. And that is really core to what we're about at IRMA and our impact in the world. On to the next slide. So we really sought to look at what exists already that we can learn from about international best practice, and what can we learn from all of these stakeholders and rights holders at the mine site level. So we looked at different international organizations that already exist and incorporated these as the baseline of the IRMA standard. You can see some of many examples. There are close to 70 different international frameworks embedded into IRMA, and these range from OECD due diligence guidance to the International Finance Corporation performance standards, International Labor Organization conventions, and others. And these are really important in looking at ways to take these broad international concepts and apply them at the mine site level. In the next slide, we'll start to look at what's in the IRMA standard for responsible mining. So the next slide, looking at these international best practices and the experience at the mine site level across companies and communities, we formed these 4 pillars of what responsible mining best practice looks like and how it can be implemented. So those 4 areas are business integrity, social responsibility, environmental responsibility, and planning for positive legacies. And you can access the IRMA standard on our website using the QR code there. In the next slide, we'll look at what's covered under business integrity. So the intent of this principle is looking at how operating companies conduct their business in a transparent manner, that companies can use their application of host country and international laws, regulations, best practice. You can see our very first chapter in the IRMA standard, and so important to me as a lawyer working to uphold rule of law as we start with legal compliance. We look at respecting human rights, building trust and credibility with workers, communities, and other stakeholders and rights holders. And the next slide, we'll look at Principle 2, positive legacies. This looks at how companies engage with stakeholders and rights holders from the very early planning stages throughout the mine life cycle to ensure positive economic, social, environmental legacies for companies, workers, and communities. This covers a range of topics from environmental and social impact assessment and management to Indigenous rights and free, prior, and informed consent. How do mine sites share benefits, including with local communities? How are these co-developed together with local communities, stakeholders, and rights holders? Topics around resettlement, emergency preparedness, and planning and financing reclamation and mine closure. In Principle 3, in the next slide, we look at how companies are engaging to ensure social responsibility, working with workers, stakeholders, and rights holders to maintain and hopefully enhance health, safety, cultural values, and quality of life and livelihoods of workers and communities. This covers fair labor in terms of work, occupational health and safety, community health and safety, mining and conflict affected or high risk areas, security, relationships with artisanal and small scale mining, and their security as a stakeholder, and community member possibly, and cultural heritage. On to the next slide, in our final principle, we focus on environmental responsibility, how companies engage with stakeholders and rights holders to ensure that mining is planned and carried out in a way that enhances environmental values and avoids or minimizes impacts to the environment and communities. This looks at waste and materials management, including tailings management, water, air, noise and vibration, greenhouse gas emissions, biodiversity, ecosystem services, and management of chemicals and substances such as cyanide and mercury. And on to the next slide. We'll take a look at how IRMA assurance works. In the next slide, we'll look at these two aspects of how mining companies engage in IRMA. The IRMA journey of a mine site begins with self-assessment, and we have a digital online tool called Mine Measure. And this is how mine sites work across their various departments to begin to collect information about how they're performing, they're implementing the best practices in the IRMA standard. This helps to reduce audit costs for the mine site. The system is confidential. The company can choose to share or not to share that they're engaging in self-assessment. On our website, for those who want to share publicly that they've started their self-assessment, you can see a list of the sites there. And this tool is completely free for use for the first site of each company. And this prepares for the next step, which is independent assessments that allow, based on an independent third-party audit, credible claims about performance and sharing results with customers, investors, stakeholders, and rights holders. We have currently 4 audit firms that are approved by IRMA to conduct these audits. We do a lot of work to make sure that they have the qualifications, the competence to conduct these comprehensive audits. In the next slide, you'll see the stages of our assurance process. We've talked about self-assessment and third-party audits. And the timelines for these is also shared here. The third-party audit can be completed as quickly as in 6 months, and it may be longer depending on optional corrective action periods that a company might engage in to improve their performance. And this is part of our impact. We really want sites to actually tangibly improve their performance and positive impacts. The next step is a surveillance audit. This is conducted 12 to 18 months after the initial audit. And then we have a re-verification audit that is approximately 36 months after the initial audit. And this cycle continues and is our strategy for continuous improvement at the site level. In the next slide, we look at some of the aspects of the IRMA audit. Audits are publicly announced in advance, at least twice, making sure that local stakeholders and rights holders know this audit is coming, understand that IRMA is also a tool for them, understand their right to engage or to choose not to engage in the audit, how audit results and data are used. And the audits are in 2 stages. So there's a desk review component and an on-site visit of a team interviewing stakeholders and rights holders on the ground. Mine sites at each stage of the process are invited to improve their performance. Again, that's our overarching objective. And IRMA requirements call on auditors to seek input from workers, from communities, from local stakeholders and rights holders throughout requirements in the IRMA standard. The mine site and IRMA also review draft audit reports for any factual errors and needed documentation. Then audit reports are made available to the public. We do have at multiple levels grievance mechanisms for any feedback or issues that might arise in any aspect of this process. So the IRMA Secretariat hosts a grievance mechanism. We require mine sites to have a mechanism. We require the auditors to also have a mechanism. And we ourselves as IRMA are overseen by an additional third party to make sure that we're getting this right. On the next slide, this shows the different outcomes of an IRMA audit. Of course, if a mine site is only engaged in self-assessment, there cannot be any types of claims made about their performance. But when they undertake an independent third-party audit, these are the different outcomes: IRMA transparency, IRMA 50, which means that the site has completed has met at least 50% of the requirements in each of those 4 principal areas that I covered in the IRMA standard, and they've met all of 40 critical requirements. We want to make sure that there is a balanced approach to how we're scoring mine sites. So we look at each of these areas, knowing that we don't want to give an achievement level to a mine site that might be doing very well in addressing greenhouse gas emissions, but at the same time might be not respecting human rights, labor rights, indigenous rights. So we look at each of these 4 areas. So IRMA 75 would be a site that meets 75% of the requirements in each of those areas, and IRMA 100 would meet all of the relevant requirements. On to the next slide. We'll look at IRMA's market coverage. In the next slide, right now, IRMA has 113 mining companies engaged with multiple sites across many of those, implementing the standard at mines in 39 countries, covering 47 different types of materials. So you can see those here. Our aim from the beginning was to have global coverage and applicability across all types of materials. We've found and heard from mine sites and companies that this has incredible value, so that they have a common standard across all of their sites globally. In some cases, different sites have healthy competition against one another to see who can score higher in their IRMA audit. And we really like seeing this type of healthy competition. But we are used all over the world in developed and developing countries alike. On to the next slide. Right now, 53% of lithium production worldwide has been or is in the process of being assessed against the IRMA standard. This data goes upward if we look at sites engaged in self-assessment, but I'll be sharing for sites engaged in our third-party audits. On to the next slide. 42% of platinum group metal production worldwide is in the process or has been assessed against the IRMA standard. On to the next slide. 35% of cobalt is covered. And on to the next slide. 29% of nickel production. So we do have, these are just some examples, but focused on some of the minerals and metals that are typically covered under critical minerals frameworks in various jurisdictions. On to the next slide. A major driver alongside the advocacy of civil society, affected communities, and labor that is driving increased engagement in IRMA is our buyers group. This is a group of purchasing companies you can see here, as well as mineral processors who together represent over $2 trillion in annual revenues. And they're really calling for positive change. And in some cases, writing into their contracts, use of IRMA and requirements for IRMA third-party audits. On to the next slide. And also helping with bringing the system together is our chain of custody standard and system. This is important for our purchasing company sector, especially. It's our method of tracking IRMA audited material from the mine site to the end user. And you can access on our website the standard assurance manual and claims guide. On to the next slide. We'll look at what external parties from IRMA are saying about what makes IRMA different. In the next slide is a report by BGR, the German Federal Institute for Geosciences and Natural Resources. This was a comprehensive study that looked at environmental, social, and governance aspects of standards for the mining sector and ranked IRMA very highly across all of these areas. And all of these reports are publicly available for you to access. And the next slide is a study by Mercedes-Benz that is regularly updated, looking at also governance, content in the standard, assurance in the standard, and also rated IRMA most highly across the standards that they looked at in their study. On the next slide is a study by Lead the Charge, which is a diverse network of local, national, and global advocacy partners looking at the fossil-free auto supply chain. And they ranked IRMA also very highly across governance, content of the standard, the process of the audit. So that is also available to you online. On to the next slide. Just a few closing slides here. One is that this year we're really pleased to share that IRMA achieved ISEAL code compliance. This is a rigorous evaluation, an independent evaluation against the ISEAL Code of Good Practice for Sustainability Systems. This made IRMA one of only 3 standards in the mining and metals standards landscape that has achieved ISEAL code compliance alongside Responsible Jewelry Council and the Aluminium Stewardship Initiative. On the next slide, we have also undergone an independent assessment against the World Trade Organization principles for the development of international standards, guides, and recommendations, and were found to be fully aligned with these. So the ISEAL compliance and this assessment are really helpful for us in our work with governments and standards bodies to show we are an existing, readily available, credible standard. On to the next slide. We do work with other standard setters in the mining sector and beyond to seek collaboration, to learn together, to look for ways that we can be compatible and interoperable, looking especially right now at chain of custody and traceability solutions. And you can see some of the standard setters that we're working with in this way, from the Alliance for Responsible Mining to the Responsible Minerals Initiative, Responsible Steel. The Forest Stewardship Council has been very informative throughout our journey from the very beginning phases of establishing the standard and system to now looking more closely at grievance mechanisms and access to remedy and claims. So these are all, and many others, helpful collaborations. Next slide. Thank you. We welcome you to be in touch with us directly, and we're happy to respond by email or in the live Q&A to any questions that you may have. It's important to note that the IRMA standard is being updated. This will keep the baseline of the current IRMA standard, and it will be applicable to various stages of mineral exploration. So that is a major change that's underway. We're committed to no regression in the level of rigor of the standard, while also balancing having a standard that continues to be practical to implement at the mine site level. So that will be finalized this year. If you're looking for ways to engage with IRMA, reach out to us by email, get onto our newsletter list, join our membership, which is free for NGOs, affected communities, and labor. But we are always looking as well for more companies, investors, and purchasing companies and mining companies, mineral processors to engage in our network. So really happy to hear from you and answer any questions you may have.